present, Kevin?
We're missing one councillor, I think, at the moment. Councillor Cunningham is here.
Got 2 Tudor, 2 Norbiton, one Cambrian, one. Yeah, so we're short Councillor Abbas, who confirmed with me last night he was coming.
Councillor, we are live.
Are we now live?
We are.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to the virtual Kingston Town Planning Subcommittee meeting, and welcome to those members of the public who are watching on the Council's YouTube channel. My name is Councillor Dave Ryder-Mills and I am chairing this meeting tonight. Mobile phones and other devices, can you please, everyone present in the meeting, ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or in silent mode for the duration of this meeting, and that any speaker devices like Google or Alexa in your vicinity are also turned off. This meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. A copy of the recording will be available on the channel shortly after the meeting. Members and officers are reminded to keep their microphones on mute unless they are called to speak. Members can indicate that they wish to speak by typing their name into the chat function. Please do not use this chat function to ask questions of officers or councillors, because they will not be answered as the chat stream cannot be seen on the public broadcast. Now we come to saying who we are. The Kingston Town Planning Subcommittee is made up of 8 councillors. We also have a number of officers present whose cameras are switched off unless invited to advise the committee on the issues before it. Pardon me. I will now introduce the councillors, non-voting members of the meeting. I will now introduce the councillors. Non-voting members of the meeting, please could you indicate your presence? Doesn't quite make sense. Sorry, I'm reading off the script to try and keep it correct. So we have Councillor Dave Ryder-Mills, myself. I'm in the chair and I'm here. Councillor Zain Abbas, is he here yet? I don't see him. Councillor Olivia Bolt.
Yep.
Councillor Fiona Bolt.
Yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Good evening. Councillor David Cunningham.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Emily Davey.
Good evening.
Councillor Maria Netley.
Good evening, Chair.
And we have apologies from Councillor John Tolley. We have planning officers in attendance this evening who will present planning reports and answer questions from the committee during the meeting. We also have Democratic Services and IT officers in attendance. Their cameras and microphones will be off unless called to speak on matters other than the provision of procedural advice. Apologies for absence. We have apologies, as I've just said, from Councillor John Tolley. Do we have any other apologies? I'm just receiving on my screen that we have Councillor Zain Abbas joining us. Is that right? Are you here now? Thank you very much. So we've had the only apologies that we need to have. Declarations of interest. Members are asked to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests and any other non-pecuniary interests, i.e. personal interests, relevant to items on this agenda. Do members have any declarations of interest? Please indicate using the chat function now, and I will call you to speak. I'm waiting for a couple of seconds for anything to appear on the chat function. I'm not seeing anything. So I'm going to say there are no declarations of interest. Item 3, to confirm the minutes of the meeting of the Kingston Town Planning Subcommittee held on the 8th of July. Are there any objections to approving those minutes as accurate? I'm seeing nobody entering anything on the chat function. I will sign them at a later date. I have a copy here in my in my presence. Next item on the agenda is the first planning application. The process is that Will Flaherty will present the report, after which members can ask questions of the planning officer. We, I believe, have an objector who will be asked to speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. I believe we do not have the applicant, so we will not be hearing a right of reply from the applicant. We can then ask the objector questions up to 5 minutes worth, and likewise to the applicant, but we haven't got the applicant, so we can't. There'll then be a sweep up by the planning officer, questions from the committee to the planning officer. We will then discuss the item. We may propose motions or add conditions. They will need a proposer and seconder. The motion will need to be discussed and voted on, and we get the final decision. That will be the same for the other 2 applications as well. So the first planning application is for 19/01173/FUL, Dollery Court, Kingston Road, the erection of an additional floor creating 4 flats and the construction of a lift shaft at the rear of the building. There is a small amount of late material, which is basically an amendment to condition 1, revision B. The applicant's agent has confirmed agreement to sign into and sign a legal agreement to any future occupants and their visitors from obtaining street parking permits, to which the RBK neighbourhood traffic engineer has raised no objections. So I have a note saying that Dollery Court is indeed privately owned. So the planning officer, Will Flaherty, will present the report. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you see the presentation?
I'm sorry about that.
Can you see the presentation, Chairman?
Sorry, was that my fault then?
If I maybe, Mr. Chairman, Will, you need to present through Google Chrome, not through Modern Desktop, and through the computer you're on.
Yeah, okay, sorry about that. Please bear with me 1 second. Right. Chrome tab. Right, there we go.
For anyone listening in, this is the first time that we have used this particular platform to run the remote meeting, so bear with us if there have been a couple of issues.
Okay, can you now see the presentation, Chairman?
We
I
can.
can indeed, I can.
Brilliant, thank you. So first item relates to Dollery Court, the erection of additional floor creating 4 flats and the construction of a lift shaft to the rear of the building. This slide shows an aerial photograph of the application site. Location plan with the site outlined in red. Here's an aerial photograph looking northeast towards the rear elevation of Dollery Court. In terms of site constraints, there aren't any planning constraints such as conservation area or tree preservation orders. This is a view 1, so looking at the front elevation of Dollery Court. This is a view looking southwest towards Dollery Court from Kingston Road. View 3, this is looking southeast towards Dollery Court. This is a view of Dollery Court in relation to number 444 Kingston Road. Again, here's a view of Dollery Court in relation to number 430 Kingston Road to the east. Here's a rear view of Dollery Court looking northeast. This is another rear view in relation to number 444 looking to the north of the site. Rear view 3, this is a close-up photo showing the relationship to the neighbouring property to the east. This is a view from Jack Goodchild Way to the rear. So the most recent development you can see in the foreground of the photograph, that was approved back in September 2017. And that development comprises of 4 dwellings to the rear of Dollery Court. So the proposed developments, as we've discussed, it's 4 residential units comprising of 2 one-bedroom, 1 person, 1 2-bedroom 3-person, and 1 2-bedroom 4-person. It's proposed that there would be 4 car parking spaces to the rear of the site for the use of the residents. Here's a block plan. So you can see the slight increase in footprint towards the rear where the new lift shaft would go. Here's the existing front elevation, existing side elevations, existing rear elevation. So the proposed front elevation, you can see that the additional story would be of a mansard style. It'd be set in from the site boundaries and also the front and side elevations. Here's the proposed side elevations. Here's the existing and proposed sections. So you can see on the proposed section to the right, you have the new lift shaft there. Windows would be relocated to the left of the existing stairwell, and you'd have the additional story above with the setback from the front elevation. The proposed rear elevation, again, you can see the mansard style story and the lift shaft, which would be positioned centrally within the rear elevation. The existing ground floor plan. So the proposed ground floor plan, you can see the extension here, essentially wrapping around the existing stairwell with the lift and lobby. The proposed first, second, third floor plans, this is essentially to show that the only change to the lower levels will be the introduction of that lift shaft. The proposed fourth floor plan, we can see the proposed flats benefiting from a dual aspect. The existing roof plan, the proposed roof plan. In addition to the late materials circulated earlier, it is proposed that condition 12 is reworded. This is required to ensure that a car parking management plan and appropriately allocated spaces are implemented prior to the occupation of the first unit. So just tightening up that condition 12. The recommendation is that planning permission should be granted, subject to the signing of the legal agreement and conditions as set out in the officer's report, agenda papers, update papers, and the amended condition 12 set out in this presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have, before we ask the objector to speak, do we have any initial questions of the planning officer ourselves, please? Can you put something in the chat line to say whether you want to ask something? Whilst I'm waiting a couple of seconds for that to happen, if we've got anything, can I ask, sorry, Councillor Netley.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify the parking, a couple of things on the parking that you mentioned. So we're creating formal flats, and so I just want to know where the additional car parking spaces are coming from. And also, is it actually possible to put a condition on one floor of a property to car cap it, as opposed to the other 3 floors? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Could I possibly widen that question? It was a question I was going to ask as well. I'd like to know what the parking arrangements are for the current 12 flats themselves. There's parking out the front for the retail style on the ground floor. I believe there's been parking around the back, but I don't know whether there still is. And do they have any, do the current tenants, leaseholders have any access to parking? And if so, how much?
Thank you, Chair. If I may address your questions. In relation to the car capping, the planning application would effectively create a new planning unit within which a legal agreement could take effect on just those 4 additional units for car capping, precluding residents and visitors from acquiring car parking permits. In relation to the existing situation to the rear, there's no formal car parking arrangement. I've been advised by the applicant that there's no legal right for residents to park their cars to the rear, although I understand there might be some usage at the moment. So there is space. We've had an indicative plan. However, the condition 12, it just requires a bit more detail prior to the occupation, just to ensure that the layout and the management of the car parking arrangements would be acceptable.
Sorry, so we're talking, are we, of the applicant producing 16 car parking spaces, are we, in that plan?
No, so the car parking spaces will be the additional 4 for the additional flats. So the application, we can only address the needs of the development that's being proposed. So we couldn't put a condition on to require car parking for the existing residents. It wouldn't meet the necessary tests for imposing a planning condition. So it'd just be those details of the 4 spaces for the proposed flats in this application.
That seems rather one-sided. Councillor Netley, has that answered your question?
Not completely. So just to confirm, we could have a situation here where currently there are 12 residents who have free-for-all car parking at the rear, and then post this development, 4 of those spaces that they have all used themselves may well be taken away and will not be available to them. So effectively, this is significantly reducing the parking available for the site for the rest of the residents.
Will?
Yes, I think it's important to note that these are not legal or formal car parking spaces which are currently being used. So I don't think we can give any significant weight to any illegal car parking to the rear. So in terms of, while there may be a loss of that informal illegal car parking, it's my understanding that the existing residents would be able to apply for car parking permits, just not the 4 which are the subject of this application. So we have consulted the highways engineer, and they're satisfied with the proposed development and the implications for the existing space to the rear.
That's brought a little bit less clarity, if you forgive me. If you are saying that the current residents could apply to the council for parking permits, they're not actually in a CPZ or a permitted parking area as it is. The only parking that I'm aware of which is marked out is on the opposite side of the Kingston Road and is usually very heavily parked up anyway. Have you any comments on that, or can we get anywhere further on that?
No, I do apologise. The site is not located within a controlled parking zone. However, what I should clarify is that in terms of the current application before us, there's only a very limited amount of weight we can give to informal, illegal car parking arrangements to the rear. Yes.
So applying for permits is somewhat looking to the future possibilities.
Yes, I can confirm that there's no CPZ at the moment, and as far as I'm aware, there are no plans for such.
Okay, thank you. Maria, is that, sorry, Councillor Netley, is that?
Well, let's move on, and I might come back to this later.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Fiona Bolt.
Hi, I had the same question about the parking because I'd noticed in the sort of report that we read before the meeting, it talked about informal arrangements. I couldn't quite see how that was going to, I still don't really see how that's going to work with 4 allocated spaces going in there. I'd imagine it might be a source of some conflict, but that aside, I was just wondering, do they have a lift at the moment? I was wondering whether this new lift is going to serve all the floors or just the 4th floor, or whether it's whether there's an existing lift or something that serves the existing floor. What's the arrangement? Is it?
I think I know the answer, but I'm going to let Will tell us.
Thank you, Chairman. So there's no existing lift for the existing residents. It would only serve the additional 4 flats. And I understand there are some concerns about whether it could be sort of rolled out to the wider building. However, in terms of a planning condition which would meet the necessary tests, we can only look at the development before us. It would be unreasonable to require that the applicant provide lift access to the entire building.
Yeah, I get that, and that's what I did fear. Only that I have personal experience of living in a flat which didn't have a lift, where I had to pay a service charge for flats that did have a lift, and that also was a source of quite an annoying and expensive service charge, because we were having to sub lift repairs and things when we didn't have a lift, you know. So it seems a tricky arrangement again.
Indeed. Councillor David Cunningham.
Yes, thank you. I was going to ask something on parking, but leaving that aside, let me just clarify again the point about the lift. Am I right in assuming that the lift which serves the new top floor does not serve the other floors?
Mr. Flaherty?
Yes, you are correct, Councillor Cunningham.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Right, I think we've gained some clarity. To what satisfaction, I don't know. We now will hear from those who've registered to speak on this item. As indicated earlier, only those who've registered to speak on this application. 5 minutes speaking time is allowed for each side. I have no discretion to extend the time limit. Sam Nichols will be setting the timer and will advise the speaker when there's 1 minute left to talk. 4 residents of Dollery Court registered to speak as objectors to the application. Ms. Santosh Sood will speak on their behalf. Please would you speak clearly? And I believe you've joined us by telephone. Is that true, Ms. Sood? And if so, please go ahead.
Ms. Sood, I think you may be on mute. To unmute yourself on your phone's keyboard, you need to type star and then 6.
Am I correct in thinking we might have lost Ms. Sood?
I will give her a call, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, I do have a copy of her presentation if I need to read it, but we'll try and get it first.
That is allowable, is it, Kevin?
It is, in the circumstances.
It's not as satisfactory, though, is it? Because we can't ask her questions.
As I said, we'll try and get her first.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Chair, to confirm. Sorry. Hi, Ms. Sood. Yes, if you ring that number again, then you can join the meeting. Apologies, Chair. Ms. Sood is now going to call again.
Okay.
Ms. Sood, again, if you press star and then 6 on your keyboard on your phone, you should be able to unmute yourself. Yes,
hello.
Brilliant.
Can you hear me?
We can indeed. Thank you very much for joining us.
Let me get back to my thing, please. Just hold on. I have to find my document now.
Okay. Are we allowing her this time?
I'm back. I'm ready. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. I'm going to ask Sam to start your 5 minutes as soon as you start speaking.
Okay, right. Okay. The planning application reference 19/01173 is considered to be indirect contravention of council's own policies and guidelines. Accordingly, planning application 19-01173 remains unacceptable to the leaseholders of Dollery Court. The proposed development, by reason of its size, depth, width, height, sitting, and massing, would have an unacceptable adverse impact on the amenities of the Dollery Court on top floor properties by reason of overbearing noise, disturbance, nuisance, overlooking, loss of privacy, and visually overbearing impact. The top house development would also lead to loss of daylight and sunlight for us. Reasons for objection of above planning application: loss of privacy and overlooking. The proposal would demonstrably harm the amenities enjoyed by the Dollery Court top floor properties, in particular privacy and the right to enjoy safe residential environment. The mosque, bulk, and proximity of the rear elevation would present an overbearing and intrusive element to Dollery Court top floor properties. Overshadowing and loss of light. The proposal would demonstrably harm the amenities enjoyed by the Dollery Court top floor properties, in particular the non-existence of overshadowing or loss of light. Right to light acquired through uninterrupted period of 20 years is applicable in our case. Noise and disturbance. The proposal would demonstrably harm the amenities enjoyed by the Dollery Court top floor properties, in particular the right to enjoy a quiet and safe residential environment. Loss of sunlight and loss of daylight. The proposal would demonstrably harm the amenities enjoyed by the Dollery Court top floor properties, in particular the right and freedom to enjoy the sunlight and the daylight. In other words, the proposed extension would totally wipe out all our above amenities enjoyed by us through an uninterrupted period of 20 years. But it is the responsibility of the council to take into account the following on behalf of the residents of Dollery Court when making assessment of the above proposal, and that is that under the Human Rights Act, in particular, Protocol 1, Article 1, which stipulate that a person has the right to peaceful enjoyment of all their possessions, which includes the home and other land. Additionally, Article 8 of the Human Rights Act states that a person has the substantive right to respect for their private and family life. The infilling within existing settlement at Dollery Court through 2017 proposal 17/12181 has already amounted to serious cramming and led to gross overdevelopment of the site with detrimental impact upon residential amenities, thereby creating a safety hazard. The means of access within the site should be both safe and convenient and should not adversely affect the amenities of the existing residential property. But the proposed application does impact Dollery Court fire exit passage. This is considered to be a serious issue.
1 minute remaining.
And cannot be ignored. Accordingly, we would be grateful for a representative of the planning department to meet us at the property to allow us to illustrate the above at first hand. We request that the council take all our objections into consideration when taking decision on the proposed application. Most importantly, we would be grateful for a representative of the planning department to meet us at our property to allow us to illustrate our grave concern regarding the fire exit passage, which remains blocked at first hand prior to taking decision on the proposed application. So I hope Royal Borough of Kingston will take serious action on this and not go and approve the application prior to someone visiting the site to check the fire exit passage, which is a great of concern and is a health safety hazard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sood. Could you stay on the line, please?
Could you hear me? Could you hear me properly?
What we're doing now, Ms. Sood, if you can stay on the line, is we have, since the applicants did not register to speak, we can move on to questions from myself and my colleagues of you to try and clarify perhaps some of the points that you've very kindly made for us. Members, do you have any questions of Ms. Sood, please? Can you enter in the chat function if you have any question, please? I can't see all colleagues, so I'm not sure whether I can't see any frantic pointing at the screens.
Could I ask one question, please? Could you hear me properly?
You at this moment we can only ask you questions.
Oh, sorry.
Somebody might actually be asking a helpful question for you to inform us further, I suppose, but I'm not seeing any questions coming up. I'm going to ask one question of you myself in that case and see whether anybody. Oh, sorry, no, I've got Councillor Maria Netley first, though.
Actually,
Thank you, Natalie.
I think you were ahead of me, Councillor Ryder Mills, but thank you. Yeah, no, I just really want to understand a little bit more about the property itself. In terms of one of the aspects that we've been asking the officers is around the parking situation in the residents of Dollery Court. And could you just explain what the parking arrangements are for you at this current time?
It is in such a mess because I have had the property for 20 years. We were parking, everything is there, and suddenly somebody comes in and, they were charging us for that piece of land or whatever. And then suddenly, one day they're there, it's not, then it's gone. It's a very messy. We have a freeholder who lives in hiding. We have, developer. So we have a very, very bad situation. That is why I want someone to come to the site. And there are issues, there are problems, and there's no one to talk to.
Okay, thank you. Has that helped, Councillor Netley?
To a certain extent,
Right, okay.
It does clarify that the parking situation is not as straightforward as we
had hoped.
Yeah.
It is not at all.
Right, okay. If I can ask you a question as well, what is the current fire escape regime for the current existing flats?
What we have rear doors at the back, which are also basically we have the right to use the front door and the back doors, the two rear doors on left and right at the back, which clearly indicate fire exits as well. So what happens is we have used the back doors to enter the property from the back and use the front door, and so that has not been an issue at all. And then we go on to the return. If we are looking at the back bit. We are when we want to go out, we then turn right, and there's an arch, and we have to go underneath, and that is our exit. But it seems to be at the moment in a mess with lots of stuff in there. It's not clear what is happening, what's not. The bike racks are going to be now going to be put in the way. The cars are going to be parked. So there's no sort of clarity at all from anyone to us. And I fear for my life because the developer has been working at the property for almost a year and a half, and we don't know when we can get through. Had to go to the light to get the unblocked because we have right of way, and so it's in a very, very bad mess. So that's why I worry about the residents of Dollery Court. I want to make sure we are going to be safe, but there is at the moment there's obstruction.
Okay, thank you. I am aware of the geography. I've been inside your block of flats on many occasions.
I definitely want someone before the application gets looked at or approved. Yes. I need someone at I mean, I'm requesting very humbly. I'm not demanding.
We've heard the request. Thank you very much. I am concerned if for councillors, for colleagues' information, you enter from the front lobby, which is spacious. There, before you have to go through to the back and then start climbing up the stairs. At the base of that staircase, there is a side back entrance at the moment. I'm not clear. Thank you. I'm not seeing anybody else. I know I'm using up time. If anybody else wants to speak, can you get on quickly?
Absolutely, no problem. Because as I say, before the application, before the application gets approved.
That was a message to my colleagues. Please, we'll discuss your request in a few moments' time. But and one thing I think I will be raising when we get onto a discussion is how or if the lift shaft will balk the current situation in any way. I'm not actually visualizing it at the moment. I can't see. Yes, Maria.
Thank you, Chair. Just another question. You talk about the loss of light from the building of the fourth story. Can you just elaborate on how you think why you think there will be loss of light?
Well, I checked with the council and I was told, yes, there is going to be a loss of light. Looked at the plans and they confirmed that, yes, it's going to happen.
Okay, so I think we're out of time. So since you say you've checked with the council, I think that can be something we can chase up with planning officers later in our discussion. So at this point, thank you very much indeed.
But the noise factor is going to be a very important factor.
Yes, indeed. Right. Thank you. That completes the public speaking on this item. Will, would you give up? And can I check with Sam? Ms. Sood goes back to hearing the rest of the meeting on YouTube, does she?
Yes, Chair. Yeah, we just advised Ms. Sood to join the meeting, to watch the meeting on the YouTube channel.
Right. Thank you. In which case, now. Could Will please give a sweep up of any points arising from this question and answer session?
Thank you, Chairman. If I may first touch on impact on amenity. So this has been assessed as part of the assessment of the application. The additional floor, it will largely be built within the existing footprint. You do have the lift shaft to the rear. However, that's not considered to have any significant adverse impacts on neighbouring amenity. Issues such as noise through the construction process, they're covered by the construction management plan required by Condition 8. Also, building regulations will look at appropriate insulation between floors for internal noise. In terms of privacy, there would be no direct overlooking to neighbouring habitable room windows as a result of the proposal. Overall, it's considered that there'd be no significant or unacceptable adverse impacts on the amenities of neighbours. If I may also touch on car parking, which was raised again. So the applicant has shown that they own and control the rear part of the site. It's within the applicant's gift, say tomorrow, to cease any informal car parking arrangements. If we're looking at just the proposal before us, there is adequate capacity in that rear area for the proposed car parking. And if there are issues arising from the informal illegal car parking arrangements, that would be a matter for the freeholders and the leaseholders to discuss. So that would be a civil matter, which wouldn't be for us to consider as part of the current proposal.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions of Will, please. Can you show if you have any questions? Councillor Fiona Bolt.
Hi, I just wondered with the parking, there's no way we could impose a condition that would say the landlord has to sort the parking situation out and make it more, sort of formalise it a bit as part of the plan, because that's clearly an issue. I can see it being, an issue, especially these new flats have formalised parking. And the other thing I was going to say was, am I right in thinking that the top floor, the new floor, is going to be set back? So I can't quite see how overshadowing would happen, because it's sort of inside the existing. So it wouldn't be. It's not going to. Yeah, it's inside the current building plan, isn't it?
If I can just add. No, I'll come. Yeah, if I can just add to that, again, are we talking only about the potential 4 parking spaces, or would there be space for 16 parking spaces there? Will.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to the first point raised by Councillor Bolt, in terms of loss of light, so the proposed additional storey would be set in from the front and side elevations. To the rear, there would be a small overhang, as currently exists for the lower floors. So essentially where people access their properties, there'd be a new overhang at the rear. However, it'd be very limited in size, and you'd still have the open south-facing aspect, ensuring adequate daylight and sunlight. In relation to the point about car parking, so the amended condition 12, that would require a car park management plan, including a layout of the proposed car park, the construction specification, and details of the system process for the allocation of spaces. So as part of the current application for these 4 additional flats, we'd certainly expect details of those 4 spaces. However, there could be scope within the gift of the applicant. We cannot require them to, but it could be that a wider car parking arrangement is clarified by the applicant. But I must reiterate that there's only a requirement to provide the 4 spaces related to the current development.
Okay, we may return again, I think. Does that answer your question, Fiona?
It certainly sounds like it would be helpful, that sort of more regularising the whole arrangement for parking. See, it would be otherwise a source of conflict, possibly.
Yes. As to the overhanging, for the information of councillors who perhaps don't know the block, dare I say as well as I do, effectively all the current flats have a balcony which you walk along to get to their front entrance, or the 2 end flats that you walk along to get to the front entrances. So they're overhung by the flats above, and as Ms. Sood suggested, now the 4 flats that don't have that effective balcony above them would get a balcony above them as well. I think I'm right in saying that, am I, Will?
Yes, that's correct.
Right, thank you. Councillor Emily Davey.
I'm trying to work out how this fits with, I remember I've received an email, and I've been, as we've been looking it up, about the permitted development miscellaneous amendments in the coronavirus regulations that went through in June, which allow you to put 2 stories on a block of flats under permitted development. So what I was trying to work out is, if we can say, if we say no, or if we put a load of conditions attached to this, could the freeholder or the applicant just use the permitted development? Because if the government said you can bung 2 stories on top of any flat, as this seems to be reading that, I might have I'm not a planning lawyer, I easily misunderstand it. But how does this fit? How does this application fit with this permitted development is now 2 stories on top of blocks of flats? I was looking at the terms of it. As long as it's more than 3 stories high, it seems to fit that. So that's what I wanted to know. How does it fit with this?
Thank you, William.
So there could potentially be scope for a permitted development at a later date, but that would be subject to a number of checks and balances. There'd be a application required of that. So as it stands, the application before us is for the addition of a single story above. There's no fallback position currently, which needs to be considered. So there could be permitted development rights for something similar at a later date, but we don't have that information before us or that proposal before us.
So, sorry, could I just understand it? So,
yep.
What we could, if we put the conditions on now, and the applicant doesn't like it, so if we make it too onerous, if we do the parking not as he likes, we put stuff on the parking, he can actually say, well, I won't pursue this. I'll not use this application. I'll just use permitted development, and I don't need to worry about the parking. Don't need to worry about the light. I don't need to worry about any of this because it's under permitted development.
Will?
Yes, so that's certainly an option available to the applicant to seek to utilise their permitted development rights. However, we don't have a proposal for that before us. There's not an extant prior approval for additional stories. So I think, Councillor Davey, you're correct. It could be an option available to the applicants at a later date, but I don't think we can give it any significant weight or bearing on the proposal before us, which in any case is considered to accord with the local development plan policies and the MPPF.
Okay, if I can widen that a little bit, I know you're waiting, Councillor Cunningham, if I could widen this a little bit more myself. The only way in which we can satisfy what Ms. Sood was asking us, which was for a meeting on site with planning officers before we grant the application, would be to defer any decision tonight. Is that correct? Oh, and if that happens, again, the applicant could simply withdraw this application and go for permitted development. Is that correct?
I don't think we can second guess the intentions of the applicant. Certainly they are open to withdraw the application if it were to be deferred, or potentially there could be an appeal against non-determination. And as set out in the report, it's considered that the proposal makes the most effective use of land. It's a brownfield site, providing uplift of 4 dwellings. So I don't necessarily see a planning reason right now for deferring, but certainly if we were to defer, the applicant could appeal against non-determination. They could choose to withdraw the current application, pursue permitted development rights, but I don't think we can second guess their intentions this evening.
Yeah, that's what I thought you'd probably say. I'm noticing somebody joining by telephone. I don't think if it's the objector, we cannot let her back in, can we?
Chair, I believe that she's having trouble getting access to the YouTube live link, so she may want to listen to the meeting via this way.
Is that an acceptable situation?
I believe so, as long as she doesn't participate in the meeting.
Okay, so long as she's given that warning, then pardon me, we can permit her to be admitted, can't we? Councillor Cunningham.
Slightly different tack. The officer a moment ago mentioned construction condition 5, I believe. I'm just looking at the agenda at the moment, and the agenda 5 is very much standard building conditions. None of them tend to relate to building something on top of an occupied building, and I'm concerned that these conditions aren't adequate for construction above occupied buildings. So I wonder whether I can have some comments about that, because I'm obviously thinking about noise, vibration, all the other elements which don't appear to be covered in this. I mean, I have known in conditions where the developer has had to offer temporary accommodation to people who live directly below this. So I'm concerned about this condition, that it doesn't really cover this particular detail. It appears to be a standard condition that we have on everything for a building. So can I have some comment about the effect that this would have on the existing residents directly below what was a very major construction element, considering also that we appear to be talking about a situation where the management proposal are very important, and it would appear that if there's not goodwill between the applicant and the residents who live actually on the block, it's going to make things very difficult as well. So if I could have some comments as how you feel these conditions relate to this example.
Will.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Cunningham, in relation to condition 5, it's fairly broad in that it is all-encompassing. So it specifies the matters for the construction of the additional storey. I think it's also important to note that a lot of the concerns you've raised, they would be covered by building regulations, and it would also be a matter for the leaseholders and freeholders to agree.
Well, I'm sorry, can I just come back? Can you identify which particular condition that you say covers it? Because I've read down the conditions and I can't see any of them that cover it.
Of course. So if we look at the MPPF, paragraph 109, no, not paragraph 109, paragraph 118.
I'm looking at the conditions we would be tending to put on this application, which is chapter 5.
Yes, so there's condition 5, which requires various details in order to ensure that there's no significant adverse impact on neighbouring amenity. But what I was going to say is, if we look at paragraph 118 of the framework, it refers to the decision maker basically ensuring that where other regimes are in place, so in this case, the Control of Pollution Act and the environmental health in regards to statutory nuisances, that aspect, it should be assumed that they will function correctly to safeguard amenities. So, as I said, there's building regulations, there's safeguards under the Control of Pollution Act. So I think the condition it goes far enough alongside existing safeguards under other legislation.
It may well do. I'm specifically looking at a condition that this council would be considering imposing as part of a planning permission. And if that doesn't include such as noise and the various management plan, I think that it should.
Are you saying you'd like to draft such a condition, Councillor Cunningham, which we could then agree to?
Give me a few moments and I think if I can tabulate something, but it would be something that regarding the care that must be exercised to ensure quiet and reasonable working enjoyment by the residents below during construction, and perhaps a reduction on noisy elements, and perhaps something like, if noisy elements occur, what redress the residents would have in order to stop it.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
So if we look at condition 5, so paragraph E of condition 5, it does specifically require details for the suppression of noise and abatement of other nuisance arising from development work. So I think that would cover...
well, with respect, it doesn't. Number 5, E says measures for the laying of dust, suppression of noise and abatement of other nuisances acting from development works. Yes, I accept that, but I think that needs to be strengthened, considering I think that's a general clause, which is mostly there on all our construction items. And I think something relating specifically to the fact that it's in an occupied building is appropriate.
This can't be the first time that we have had an application which adds a story to a building. Have we had conditions applied to those in the way that Councillor Cunningham is asking for this one? Do we know? Will?
Might I come in, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please, Barry.
So one thing we have to be mindful is that the conditions we impose must meet the legal tests and therefore be necessarily proportionate, directly related to the scheme, and be necessary in all other regards. So Councillor Cunningham makes a very good point about needing to ensure that the amenities of the third floor residents are maintained. Now, we don't have many of these types of applications in the borough. It would have been some time, but we could put in a condition that would require the construction management plan that would acknowledge and respect the fact that there are existing residents on the top floor and their amenities need to be preserved. So we could put some words around that. And Mr. Chairman, if the committee is minded to approve, perhaps we could set out that wording outside of the meeting. So approve with getting that condition worded with your input after the meeting. So we'll have to be careful how we word it, because we couldn't use terms like reasonable, because that would have to be quantified. So we couldn't say the reasonable enjoyment of the neighbours downstairs, because we have to understand what that means. So we might have to go and get some details from our environmental health team just to ensure that any condition would be precise and enforceable. But because we wouldn't want to find ourselves in a situation where we have a ambiguous condition that makes it very difficult to enforce in the future. So I think we can go some way to accommodate Councillor Cunningham's wishes, but I wouldn't want to advise what the exact wording would be in the committee, because we would need to get some advice from our friends and colleagues in the Environmental Health Department. But Will is right that most of these issues would be picked up through the building control regime. Acoustic attenuation between floors would be a matter for our friends in building control. How fire would be treated, fire escapes, that would be a matter for building control. Hours of construction can be controlled by us, and we can certainly limit those in full knowledge that we're on a residential site. So in short, Mr. Chairman, yes, we could, but it's probably best to word it outside of the committee.
Is that the way forward, Councillor Cunningham?
If the committee was mindful to go ahead, yeah, that sounds sensible. Although I was not making the point that was made regarding building control about the actual design, the acoustic in the final state. I was talking about during the construction period. Anyway, I would be content if the committee were to approve it, to have you at least the officers in conjunction with you as the chair to make a suitable wording to strengthen number 5.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maria Netley.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that Councillor Cunningham has pretty much asked exactly the same question that I was going to ask around, but Barry has clarified with, I was very concerned about there were no hours of construction in here, and we usually do see something, and I think given that this is a residential site, and given that we are going through a period at the moment where more people are at home for longer periods of time, I certainly have had several complaints or, residents very worried about work going on next door to them, and so I do worry that that during this period it will be extremely unpleasant for the people who live on the top floor. So anything we can do to restrict the hours so that there is some peace, I think would be welcome. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think we've moved inadvertently on from questions to the planning officer to comments amongst ourselves. If others would agree with that, unless Will has anything else to say on the subject, we'll further go into comments from colleagues. If you want to make a comment, can you please show it in the chat line? Again, I'm not seeing any coming up in the chat line, and I'm not seeing colleagues' fingers pointing towards their keyboards to make a move. I think I would make a comment that we seem to be, were we to have concerns with this application, and I have no indication whether we have or not, but were we to have concerns, we are in a bit of a cleft stick. If we refuse the application, then the freeholder can come back with an almost identical plan, but which goes through on permitted development, which we can make no conditions to. If we were to go for a deferral, then that opens up both that possibility and also an application for non-determination by the freeholder. So it seems that the freeholder holds more cards at the current time than we have to simply say, we don't like this application, we're going to refuse it. I would welcome some comments on that, please. Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Cunningham, you've just muted yourself.
Sorry. Yes, my comment, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think as far as the development was concerned, leaving aside the point I made regarding the construction, I don't think it's unacceptable. If anything, it's possibly more attractive than the other land building that we have at the moment. I'm not very happy that they're putting in a lift which appears to serve only the top floor. Doesn't seem to benefit the other tenants at all, but there doesn't seem to be much we could do about it. I am still rather concerned if there is not goodwill between the applicant and the people who are likely to suffer below, that the management plan and the enforcement of that is going to be very, very problematic. But having said that, I think on the basis of what you've said, it would be pointless to have a meeting that won't actually give us much information that we don't already have. And I think it's fairly clear that from what the committee people have said so far, we feel that on the face of it, it would look like the existing tenants are getting a bit of a raw deal, but that's not up to us to ascertain. So I would, bearing in mind my views on the management of it, which I think are very important, I think it's possibly we have no alternative but to go ahead to approve this application.
Anyone else, please? I really, really don't like this application, but I'm minded to agree with Councillor Cunningham. I think they're selling a bit of a shoddy deal to the current residents on several fronts. But I'm not sure we can do anything about it without making the situation potentially worse. Councillor Fiona Bolt.
I just wanted to agree. I mean, I agree. I think the lift serving one floor is not fair, and the car park situation is not fair. But I think it could be worse, like you say, if we end up with a development that goes ahead onto permitted development where we don't get any say at all in, you know, like the construction management. If we can do something to sort of keep that under control by approving this application rather than, you know, letting it go ahead, sort of, you know, then it's, you know. So basically, I agree. The same. I feel the same.
Anyone else? Councillor Maria Netley.
And I think everyone really has said what we all feel. I don't think anyone's particularly comfortable with this application, but as Councillor Cumming and Councillor Bolt said, I personally think I can see no reason, unfortunately, to reject this.
We can follow Barry Lomax's advice, though, to, were we so minded, to accept this application, but to work outside this meeting on strengthening the conditions in the way that he mentioned. Councillor Maria Netley.
Yeah, if we do approve, I would definitely like to go ahead on that understanding.
Right. Anybody else before we move on?
Chair, Councillor Netley is just. Oh.
I thought, yeah, I think that was right. I don't know why I wasn't aware that she'd left.
I hit the wrong button and I got back pretty quickly.
You did. I blinked. I missed it. Right. In that case, we are in a position where we propose to add a condition, but we are going to word it outside this meeting in discussion between the chair and Mr. Lomax, and we'll share the wording with the rest of the committee. Is that right? I need to have a proposer and seconder that we are going to follow that course of action. Do I not know? Councillor Cunningham is shaking his head vigorously, and I always listen to what his great experience says. Would you like to elaborate, Councillor?
I go ahead as you prefer, Chair. I was merely making the comment that as the Chair, you didn't specifically need to have a seconder, but that's for another day, I think, to discuss that. I leave the chairing to you.
I'm following my crib sheet from Democratic Services saying the chair needs to ask for a seconder for a proposal to add the condition. Just so I am confident that I'm doing the right thing, do I have a seconder? I'd like to propose it. I see Councillor Fiona Bolt indicating that she will second that. And if we were to approve the application, would members be in favour of this process of adding a condition that we word outside the meeting? We
Yes.
need to have a vote on this, do we? Or are we all in agreement?
Chair, we need to vote. It's a planning meeting.
It's a planning meeting, so we do need to go through the rigmarole of voting then. In other words, we are now voting that were we to approve the application, we will be working on a condition along the lines that Barry Lomax suggested being worked on between planning officers and myself. We now go through the, I've lost this on the crib sheet. Yes. we have to go through the process and planning applications, remote planning applications. Kevin will call your names out, and you need to answer, firstly, that you were in the meeting for the entire discussion, and that you whether to wish to record a vote for or against or to abstain on preparing this condition. Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Abbas. Councillor
Abbas, I can confirm I was present for the duration of the item and I am voting yes.
Councillor Bull. Councillor Fiona Bull.
Yes, I can confirm that I was in the meeting the whole time and I'm in favour of the amendment.
Councillor Olivia Bull.
I can confirm that I was in the meeting for the entirety of the item and I'm also voting in favour of the amendment.
Councillor David Cunningham.
I confirm I've been here for the entire meeting and I'm voting for the motion. Sorry, the amendment.
Councillor Emily Davey.
I confirm that I've been here for the entire meeting and that I'm voting for the amendment.
Councillor Maria Netley.
I can confirm that I was here for the entire item and I'm voting in favour of the amendment.
And Councillor Ridermills, Dave Ridermills.
I can confirm that I've been present during the entire discussion and I will be voting in favour of preparing the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Kevin, your sound.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is unanimous.
Yeah, I didn't hear that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chair. The vote was unanimous in favour of.
Thank you very much. In which case, we now move to the vote on the actual proposal. The recommendation of the report is to permit, subject to the conditions that we've just discussed. I will move that recommendation from the chair. And do I have a seconder for that, please?
Yes, happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Abbas. We now vote on the planning application itself, and again go through the same procedure. You have to say, confirm that you've been present for the entire discussion and which way you are voting. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Abbas.
I can confirm I've been here for the duration of the item and I'm voting in favour.
Councillor Fiona Bull.
I can confirm I've been present for the entire meeting and that I'm voting in favour.
And Councillor Olivia Bull.
I can confirm that I have been present for the entire item and I am voting in favour.
Councillor Cunningham.
I confirm I've been here for the entire meeting and I'm voting in favour.
Councillor Davey.
I confirm I've been here for the entire meeting and I'm voting in favour.
Councillor Netley.
I can confirm I've been here for the entire meeting and I'm voting in favour.
Councillor Ridermills.
I can confirm I've been present for the entire meeting and I'm voting in favour of the application with a heavy heart.
Thank you. Yeah, that's unanimous.
Right. For the because the objector did lose contact with us a bit, I'm hoping that she is hearing this and has heard enough to note that although we're unhappy to be passing this application, it is for fear that something worse would happen were we to either defer the application or refuse it. That said, we can move on to the next application. Excuse me while I find my place in the crib sheet. Next planning application is 20/01304/FUL, units 5 to 8 Tadlow Washington Road, Kingston upon Thames. The application is for the variation of condition 1, open brackets, time period, close brackets, of planning permission 16/12/086 full, variation of condition 1, temporary building of the planning application 06/12765 full, renewal of temporary permission for a part single and part 2-story temporary building in the rear service yard and use of 2 ground floor units in parade to provide RBK housing officers B1 use, extension of the date by which the buildings shall be discontinued and the temporary buildings and associated infrastructure removed from the land to 12/7/2022. We have an objector. It's Mr. Felix Clayton, who has just asked to join this meeting. He will be speaking on behalf of himself and one other resident. There is no one registered to speak for the applicant. Planning Officer Will Flaherty will present the report. Thank you. Please go ahead. Will, are you muted or are you speaking?
Apologies, Chairman, I was muted.
Right. Can we start again?
Yes, start again. Yes, as described by the Chairman, the application seeks a variation of condition 1, the time period of planning permission 16/1208/full, which granted planning permission for a renewal of a temporary permission for the existing buildings and use of the ground floor on site. Here's an aerial photograph showing the location of the temporary building. The location plan, so the 2 buildings, the temporary building on the left and main building on the right, in which the ground floor is being currently used. This slide shows a photograph looking northwest towards the temporary building. A view directly north looking towards the temporary building with the main building visible to the right. This slide shows a view towards number 35 Rolls Road. The temporary building is visible on the right. This slide shows a view between the temporary building and the main building. You can see the connecting corridor to the centre of the photograph. This slide shows a view southwest towards the temporary building. And the current slide shows a view northwest towards numbers 1 to 11 Somerset Road. And the current slide shows a view at the front of Tadlow, so the ground floor is currently in use by the housing team. Just to clarify the proposed development, there's no changes proposed to the existing car parking arrangement, and there's no changes proposed to the existing character and appearance, which have both been previously approved. The application seeks only to extend the temporary permission for the temporary buildings and use of the ground floor for a further 2 years. Here's the existing ground floor plan of the temporary building. Just to reiterate, there's no changes. This is previously approved plan. The ground floor of the main building, the first floor of the temporary building, You can see a site plan with the temporary building to the rear. This slide shows a south elevation. Looking northwards, we can see the main building on the right and properties along Rolls Road to the left. So the recommendation is that planning permission should be granted subject to the planning conditions as set out in the officer's report and agenda papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Do we have any initial questions of the planning officer at this point? I'll give you a moment to sign up to them. I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on to hear from those who've registered to speak on this item. As indicated earlier, only those who've registered to speak can speak on this application. 5 minutes speaking time is allowed for each side. I have no discretion to extend the time limit. Sam will set the time clock and advise the speaker when there's 1 minute left to speak. The residents two residents have registered to speak as objectors to the application. Mr. Felix Clayton will speak on their behalf. Please, I'm seeing that you are in the meeting, Felix.
Yes,
so thank you. So when you are ready to speak, I'm hoping that Sam is ready to start the timer.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to present some photos. I hope that's okay.
I'm hoping so.
Okay.
No,
hang on.
I'm
Sam?
sorry, Felix. Unfortunately, you aren't able to show material to present new material to the committee. It's outlined in the planning protocol. We can't show new material to the committee.
Okay. Well, I was told I could during the pre-call with Kevin.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was incorrect. Unfortunately, you aren't able to do that. I do apologise.
If it's any help, Felix, we have been circulated with the photographs that you or your wife have sent in on this application, so we are aware of what several of the things that I suspect you're about to speak to us about do look like.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it'd be useful to be able to refer to the photos when I speak, but okay, if that's the rules.
I'm afraid rules are very tight for these planning meetings.
Okay. Good to be clear on these things. Okay. Am I ready to go? Good to go?
Okay, can we restart the clock now, Sam?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Our objections to the Tadlow modular building are as follows. The permit uses the incorrect dimensions of our home at number 35 Rowles Road. The home closest and most oppressed by the modular building. In the image the council have used, our home is depicted as being much smaller than it is. In reality, we are closer to the boundary, closer to the modular building, and the conservatory of our home is parallel with 2 windows from the modular building facing it. This, from our point of view, is a significant reason for rejection. It is the cause of numerous problems and disturbances. The building is a category B1A use, but this cannot be an adequate classification for the use of the premises by the third-party contractor Axis. The ground floor section of the modular building is used by Axis. This runs parallel to our garden. It is not housing, it's not CRE. The company Axis lists the site on their website, and as my pictures show, they have their sign above the door. Axis work in maintenance of properties, demolition, refurbishment, etc. As a result of this, there are countless vans and trucks working and using the self-titled service yard that stores landfill, industrial, and commercial waste on the site, which can also be classed as hazardous. This is inappropriate for a residential area and is not covered by a B1 classification, even a B2, which is not applied here, and refers to general industry, specifically excludes waste and hazardous materials. This has to be a misapplication. Number 3, the council's planning portal document showed that development management has classified the land use as E3, which is usually meant for employment areas, not residential areas. It is an unusual decision and one that should not result in the adverse impact of fumes. The constant use of the service yard and idling vans definitely results in high levels of toxic air, even contaminating the rooms in our home. Number 4, the planning permission addressed the aspect and amenity from the north, south, and east, but conveniently failed to mention the west. The west is 35 Rowles Road. We have 11 windows looking into our garden at the ground floor level and 5 at the first floor level. We're also well overlooked by the south side windows. On top of failing to obscure the windows in the correct way that they were requested to do back in 2016, the employees of Axis and the council opened the windows. This is a breach of privacy. We are hopeful that our councils will protect our family from further violation by insisting the building be finally removed. The opening of the windows means that staff, who I assume are not DBS checked, have a clear view into our garden and home, violating my children's privacy and my own. Added to this, we have complained that when the Axis staff open the windows and we are gardening, as the building is only 116 centimetres from our boundary, opening the windows exposes us to face-to-face contact. This breaks social distancing rules as part of the COVID-19 regulations. The result is that we as a family have to restrict where we stand and move in the perimeter of our garden and home, and this is not acceptable, particularly because a member of our household is immunocompromised. I would also point out that prior to lockdown, the building was used during the night, 3 or 4 a.m, and the lights would all be switched on, causing disturbance through artificial light emanating from the site. Again, because the wrong dimensions of our home have been used, we are very close to these windows when they're all lit up. Number 5, the parking layout the council have in place has never been applied, and instead they allow 12 vehicles to park against our boundary. Up to 37 vehicles can be in the car park. This is too much and unacceptable. While development management states they have the right to include additional parking other than the 18 spaces shown, this makes a mockery of the planning system. We could all submit fanciful plans with no intention to adhere to them. It is a shameful position to take. If the correct layout were applied, we would object to the 2 spaces closest to our boundary. The noise and pollution are hazards to our home and health because we're only 90 centimetres from the boundary line. 6, the poor management of the site has also meant that bin collections have been missed on numerous occasions, leaving rubbish piling up and creating a rat problem. In summary, the original planning had several issues. The approved plans were not applied correctly, and the site is so poorly managed that any reasonable person would not consent to the situation continuing for a further 2 years. However convenient it has been for council and its contractors to use the site for so many years, there has to be a duty of care to all its residents. CR redevelopment delays should not be reasoned as an excuse for continuation when Axis is primarily operating in the modular building.
Thank you very much. Very timely of you. Sam didn't even give you the 1 minute warning, so presumably you finished in very good time. Thank you very much indeed. Since we have no applicant to exercise a right of reply to that, we can now move straight to whether members have any questions of the objector, which we also have 5 minutes to do. So if you'd like to ask Mr. Clayton anything, please can you show in the chats. While I'm waiting, I have one very simple question of Mr. Clayton. Can you confirm that you did meet with Councillor Ollie Waring and myself and actually told us of the incorrect dimensions on the map which appears still to be being used?
Yes, correct. We did.
Thank you. I will return to that when we go into further discussion. I'm seeing no questions of your good self, which means that, sorry, I'm coming down my crib sheet again. So we say at this point, thank you very much, Mr. Clayton. This completes the public speaking on this item. Will, would you give us a sweep up of anything arising from that?
Thank you, Chairman. With regards to the existing windows, it's acknowledged that a film has been attached to obscure views from those windows. However, we are carrying forward a planning condition from the previous approval. So condition 3, which would require manufacturer's details of privacy film to a minimum of level 3 on the Pilkington scale for all of the first floor windows on the north, south and east facing elevations. So I think that would go some way in securing levels of privacy for neighbouring properties. In relation to the point raised about fumes and pollution, I understand that Environmental Health are currently investigating this matter as a nuisance. So I think that is being addressed by an alternative regime. And with regards to the other points about unsociable parking, I think certainly there's scope for informatives directing the applicant to sort of encourage considerate parking of vehicles in order to safeguard neighbouring amenity. I think it's important to note that the building is there, the use is there, it's been previously permitted. The current application seeks to extend the period of time by a further 2 years. So we're not assessing any material changes in terms of car parking layout or anything like that.
Thank you. That means we now turn to comments from members. I'm going to pull rank, if I may, because in my role as ward councillor, I have obtained some further information from relevant housing officers. I am most upset that either housing didn't pass on or planning didn't receive or something an updated map showing how close Mr. Clayton's house is to the car park. It is indeed very close indeed, and that was reported last year. With regards to his objections, I believe there is already film obscuring the view from the upper stories of the temporary building. However, in the light of what Will has said, this has to be checked that it is good enough. You will note that there is an informative at the end of this item, which I insisted be put there, asking that vehicles park frontways towards his boundary. This again was asked last year, but his photographs clearly show that it was not adhered to. So to take that further, housing have agreed with me that they will put up further signage saying that they should park frontways into marked spaces, which they will make sure are marked, and also signage will go up requiring them to park sensibly and forwards into those spaces, and also not to let their engines idle. With regard to the other complaints, I'm told that the use by Axis is legitimate because they are in fact under contract to the council to act with the council and to co-locate with the council, which I'm told brings them into the fold, as you like. So it is a legitimate use to have them there. The matter is also the subject of both a stage 1 complaint and a stage 2 complaint, which is currently being worked on to provide a report on these matters to the Claytons. There should be no offloading of waste, and that again, one of the photos at least shows, in fact, one of the planning department's photos shows that there is waste there, which should not happen. As to the number of vehicles, I have an agreement with Housing now that there should be 18 spaces marked out in the car park, so that no more than 18 vehicles use it. The reason they say they need to go for this extension is that although Tadlow will be the first building to be demolished should the regeneration of the Cambridge Road estate be allowed to go ahead by future planning application, but expected this autumn, then it will be demolished as quickly as possible by the partners Countryside, and the demolition is therefore likely to be very much in advance of the 2 years that they are now asking for extended permission for. Very few housing officers are working from the site, so there shouldn't be as many vehicles now as there have been in the past, but obviously access vehicles will still want to be there so that they can respond quickly to maintenance issues on the estate, particularly as we move into the regeneration. I just offer that as information which I have been told. We now go to any other comments that other members might have. Councillor Maria Netley.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually a question. We talked about the obscuring of the windows, but the objector, Mr. Clayton, actually mentioned the windows being open. There's little point in going to the extent of obscuring windows if they're going to be left open. So I wonder if Will would be able to comment on that. Thank you.
Will.
If I may just come back to that question in a couple of minutes while I review the plans, please.
Okay, I think it is indeed a moot point, though. So I certainly would be willing to take that away if necessary, and as ward councillor, make sure that they didn't open the windows. The other way of doing this is presumably we could add a condition that the windows facing in that direction were not to be opened. Is that possible?
Yes, so I believe that the windows need to be openable for health and safety reasons. However, I think there could be scope for a suitably worded condition to partially limit opening. So it could be maybe details of the fastenings for the windows, perhaps, if that would address your concerns, Chairman.
I think that's up to this committee. Do we have any other comments? Right. Do we have any questions, further questions for Will? In which case it's comments amongst ourselves now. Any comments, please? Councillor Emily Davey.
It sounds like if we can think about actually dealing with the opening of the windows, of either if they're ones that open in a different way, so you don't necessarily have to open wide open into the. I've gone into those buildings, but I have never actually examined their window fastenings. So I can see that health and safety, we've got to balance the the fact that people have got to be able to get out of the building if there's a fire, or if there's, you know, health and safety, but equally, there must be a way of just putting some form of just fixing the windows on differently. We can put that as a condition. It might improve things.
Indeed, I can't see any possibility of them using upstairs windows to as a fire escape. I know Axis have very agile people, but I don't think it's a suitable fire escape. Any other comments?
And could I also add that that car park at the back, it has been a perennial problem, and that it's one of those aspects where we've got to actually sort out car parking in the area, because there's no restriction on people parking at the back. There's no way of blocking any old person to park there at the moment. And we can't clamp on our own land.
Right, that is a slight worry, or a significant worry. The signage, of course, will help, and I would ask for your cooperation in making sure that that signage is firmly worded and does go up. Perhaps using your role as a portfolio holder. Any other comments before we move to wording the condition? Maria Netley.
Thanks, Chair. I think just coming back to the windows, I think it would be unfair to sort of expect people to work in a building in hot weather without some ability to open windows. But I do think we need sort of, it may be a case of enforcing, but just make sure that those windows are not fully opened and that they're only opened a certain amount to respect the privacy. Because as I said before, it seems pointless putting obscuring film on windows and then having them wide open. Thank you.
Okay. If I could possibly ask for Councillor Davy to use her influence as well as portfolio holder, since I'm told that very many fewer people are working from those offices, it strikes me that nobody needs to use the upper floor anyway. In the short time that it will still be existing, if we can move all the operations forward in the building so that the back offices aren't used and the upper offices aren't used, that surely would be a solution to the overlooking whether or not there was film on the windows. I have Councillor Cunningham.
Haven't very much to say, although I do remember being on the original committee that approved this. Do remember there was an awful lot of discussion about the tree at the time, so I'm pleased to see that it looks to be flourishing. You seem to have done a very good job as ward councillor in this element, and seem to have covered a lot of items. It does seem that there are points to be taken up regarding the management of it, and I'm content to leave that for Emily to take up as the lead member. But it does seem very unfortunate that we as a council should have a situation where we have a planning permission and then appear to behave in an unacceptable manner. So not necessarily a planning application, but if it was a developer, we probably would be taking a different tack on it. Anyway, as I say, I probably congratulate you as the chair in order to have seemed to have covered those items. I think a lot more thought needs to be given regarding the windows than we can actually do here, but I leave that with Emily.
Emily, do you want to say anything at this stage or not?
I can see what I can do with Access, because it's mainly Access there who are not, they are contractors of the council. And I know a lot of our council officers are working from home. I do not know how many Access employees are working from home. I can certainly bring it up and find out how many are working in there, and if they could arrange themselves within the room so that they aren't overlooking, that they could actually be on the other side of the building or work out a different, a place that I imagine it is quite spacious, because I know when I've been downstairs in that building, there have been council officers who are now working from home, because I have been in contact with them.
It actually did sound to me like that there is a lot of space in that building now, so I don't see any reason why actually the rear of the building should be used at all. I did raise the possibility in my discussions that perhaps did they really need this extension? Couldn't they just take the temporary building down completely? Of course, that costs money, and it's far more efficient to demolish the whole of Tadlow at the same time, temporary building as well as the housing elements as well as the offices. But at least we could evacuate that back element and leave it empty, which would solve many of the problems anyway. That combined with actually getting people to park more thoughtfully and have good signage and marked bays for them to park in, I'm hoping this time would satisfy Mr. and Mrs. Clayton, although I have to say that if I were them, I would be sceptical that it hasn't worked so far, so why should it work on the request of this committee? But I think that's what we have to try. If there is nothing else on the way of comments, can I ask that perhaps the wording of the condition be worked on by Councillor Davey and myself in conjunction with a planning officer? Is that a way forward?
Yes, I think certainly as a draft condition, we could require details of measures to ensure or safeguard privacy of neighbouring properties, something along those lines, but more than happy to finalise a suitably worded condition in conjunction with yourself and Councillor Davies.
Is that agreeable to the committee? Do we have to get, I suppose we have to go through the voting, do we, Kevin?
We do, Councillor. We do, Councillor.
You're muted, Councillor Cunningham, but I can guess what the shake of the head and the comment was. In which case, can we get on to the voting that the
Chair, if the committee are unanimous in their view to add this as a condition, it doesn't necessarily need to be voted on.
Thank you very much indeed, Sam. Do I have any dissenters to that? Please show now and quickly. I see no dissenters, so that means that we can, have I finished everything else? Adding the condition. So the recommendation of the report is to permit, subject to the commissions that we've been speaking about. I will move that recommendation from the chair. Do I have a seconder? If you can enter into the chat, please. I think I saw Emily Davey suggesting, yes, I do. Oh, got a choice of seconders from David Cunningham and Emily Davey. In that case, we do now move to the vote, and I ask Kevin to initiate that, please.
Councillors, I call on you to advise that confirm you were in the meeting for the entire discussion and advise your vote, whether it be for, against, or abstain. Councillor Abbas?
I can confirm I've been here for the duration of the item and I'm voting for.
Councillor Fiona Boot.
I confirm I've been here for the duration of the whole item and I'm voting for.
Councillor Olivia Boot.
I confirm I have been here for the whole of the discussion and I am voting for.
Councillor Cunningham.
I confirm I've been here for the whole of the meeting and I'm voting for.
Councillor Davey.
I confirm I've been here for the whole discussion. I'm voting for.
Councillor Hinckley.
I can confirm I've been here for the whole discussion and I'm voting for.
And Councillor Ryder-Mills.
I confirm I've been here for the whole discussion and I will be voting for.
Thank you, Councillor. That's unanimous.
Thank you. In that case, we can move on to item 6. The planning application is 20-01206, stroke full, 65 Fairfield Road, KT1 2PX. Find the papers on Appendix C. It's the erection of a 2-storey, 5-bedroom, single-family dwelling house following the demolition of a similarly sized dwelling with associated cycle storage and refuse storage. There is an objector who will be speaking on behalf of himself and one other resident. The applicant is Mr. John Pike. Remind me, Kevin, is he going to be speaking to us?
Mr. Pike will be speaking.
Right, thank you. Planning Officer Will Flaherty to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Application 20/01/206/full relates to 65 Fairfield Road with the demolition of the existing dwelling and the erection of a replacement 2-storey, 5-bedroom dwelling. The current slide shows the application site aerial photograph. The location plan with the site outlined in red. Angled aerial photograph looking northwards towards the site with Kingston Grammar School to the immediate east. In terms of site constraint, the site itself falls within the Fairfield Knights Park Conservation Area and is also located within the Kingston Town Centre area of archaeological significance. The site is located in Fluvial Flood Zone 1, outside of Fluvial Flood Zone 2 to the south. So this slide shows views of number 65 from Fairfield Road. So the photograph on the left looking northwest towards the front of the property, the photograph on the right looking northeast towards the property. This is a more long-range street scene photograph looking due west. So in the foreground we can see Kingston Grammar School and the application property just visible to the left. This is a view of number 65 from the southwest. So we can see again Kingston Grammar School to the rear and the application property where the mouse cursor is. This slide shows views looking southwest, so from the rear of the property to the rear elevation of the existing dwelling. You can see on the photograph on the right that the neighbouring property to the west, they have a substantial extension broadly in line with the footprint of number 65. This photograph is from within the application site looking towards neighbouring number 63. As you can see, there's extensions at number 63, no habitable room windows on that side elevation. This photo, again, from within the garden of number 65. This is looking towards Kingston Grammar School to the east. And this photograph is looking northwest to number 2 Caversham Road, which is to the rear of the application site. So the proposal, it's a demolition of the existing family dwelling with a replacement family dwelling of a similar footprint. The existing floor plans, so you can see the existing outbuilding in the rear garden, as well as development at the first and second floor levels. The proposed ground floor plan, so there would be a smaller outbuilding in the rear garden, and the footprint of the building, the replacement dwelling, would be broadly similar to the existing. In terms of the proposed first floor plan, again, similar position to the existing dwelling. There'd be a green roof above the outbuilding and the attached canopy. And then the proposed second floor, so it's proposed that there would be a piggyback extension, which will become more clear in the elevations which are to follow. So the existing and proposed roof plans, so you can see that the overall footprint is broadly similar, and the piggyback extension is set back a minimum of 3.6 metres from the front elevation in accordance with the design SPD. This is the existing front elevation, existing side elevation on the west, existing side elevation east. You see also the outline of the neighbouring property number 63, the existing rear elevation. So the proposed front elevation, the architectural style, it broadly reflects what is characteristic of the wider conservation area. The piggyback extension, it's in accordance with the design SPD guidance, so a maximum of 1.3 metres increase in height and the setback of 3.6 metres from the front elevation. The proposed side elevation west, so here you can see the setback in greater detail. Proposed side elevation east, so you can see here that it would not extend beyond the two-storey rear projection at number 63. The proposed rear elevation, there are some contemporary glazing arrangements on the rear, however, these would not be highly visible from public realm. Existing and proposed sections, just to give you an idea of the scale of the replacement dwelling. These are the existing sections, so just to show the existing building in relation to Kingston Grammar School and neighbouring properties. The proposed sections, so as you see, the proposed piggyback extension, it would be set back quite significantly from the main roof form of Kingston Grammar School. So this is the existing and proposed block plans, so you can see that broadly it's similar footprint to existing. This is an existing 3D drawing of the rear, and this is the proposed 3D drawing of the rear. So the recommendation is that planning permission is granted subject to planning conditions as set out in the officer's report and agenda papers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do any members have any initial questions of Will before we go further? Please show. I'm not seeing anybody coming up on the chat line. In which case, we will now hear from those who are registered to speak on the item. As indicated earlier, only those who've registered to speak can speak to the application. 5 minutes speaking time is allowed for each side. I have no discretion to extend the time limit. Sam will set the timer clock and advise the speaker when 1 minute is left to talk. 2 residents have registered to speak as objectors to the application. Mr. Jeremy Stokes, sorry, can I confirm your name, Mr. Stokes? You're down as Stokes in one place and Stoke in the other place.
It's most definitely Stokes. Thank you.
Stokes, right. Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Stokes, would you like to speak?
Thank you very much, councillors. Object to the proposed development.
Sorry, can we restart that? There was a fault in the. I don't know whether other members suffered it as well. I wasn't hearing him continuously. Sam, are we able to reset and start again?
Yes, Chair, we'll start again.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, councillors. Good evening. Collectively, the residents of 246 and 8 Caversham Road object to the proposed development, as we believe it contravenes the planning strategies and policies set out by the council, most emphatically regarding overlooking of properties and privacy. From the officer's report, we were drawn to the assertions drawn in section 30, none of which address objections raised by the residents, especially regarding the addition of a rear third floor window, which is not present in the current structure, nor in the neighbouring 63 Fairfield Road. These are the only 2 properties which enjoy north-facing aspects onto the rear gardens of Caversham Road. That proposed first floor window would facilitate direct, unrestricted overlooking view into the private rear gardens of numbers 2, 4, 6 and 8 Caversham Road, and also the internal living space of number 2, causing a substantive loss of privacy. Additionally, the second floor window to the rear of the proposed piggyback loft extension is higher than currently exists, placing it above the height of the subordinate rear extension. So the current structure prevents the existing fenestration having views into 2 Caversham Road, while the proposed height increase would allow the window to look over that subordinate extension to the property. We believe that proposal contravenes core strategy GM10 and London Plan Policy 76 and architecture, quoting, buildings and structures should not cause unacceptable harm to the amenity of surrounding land and buildings, particularly residential buildings with large relation to privacy and overshadowing. Section 22 of the officer's report also disregards objections raised by Kingston Town Neighbourhood Conservation Area Committee over our joint concern on the piggyback roof extension, references the previous approval given at 24 Minerva Road. That reference property is at the far north end of Minerva Road. It's in a dead-end street where the extension is not particularly visible from the street scene due to the angle of approach to the building. Also, 24 Minerva Road does not face onto the Fairfield Recreation Ground as 65 Fairfield Road does, where the proposed extension will be clearly visible from the park as well as approaching from along West along Fairfield Road. Section 30 of the officer's report, and again quoting, vertical rear elevation windows will provide long views of the rear garden of properties on Caversham Road, wherever it's considered that the proposal would not give rise to a material loss of overlooking or privacy, given that a degree of mutual overlooking already exists, which is not uncommon in a suburban area, end of quote. That consideration is substantively flawed. No engagement has taken place with those affected to test the statement. No such view currently exists, and it would not be a long view. It would directly overlook from the proposed window into the rear gardens and living space of 2 Caversham Road, and the mutual overlooking cited in the paper is side angled and in no way comparable to the intrusive nature of the proposed window. And again, that would seem to contravene rules outlined in the planning strategies and policy regarding privacy. Section 31 of the officer's report therefore concludes there's no adverse effect on privacy, which we believe to be flawed and incorrect, in contravention of policy DM10, that development proposals, and I'm quoting again, have regard to the amenities of occupants and neighbours, including in terms of privacy and the avoidance of visual intrusion, end of quote. And section 46 of the report we've noted states the proposed development will not unduly impact on the residential of neighbouring occupiers. The proposal, however, does clearly contravene policy DM10, that the most essential elements of contribution to the character and local distinctiveness of a street or area, which should be respected, maintained or enhanced with regard to the amenities of occupants and neighbours, including in terms of privacy. end of quote, and we would consider this proposal does none of those things. Section 25 of the officer's report states that the existing outbuilding will be demolished and replaced with a new outbuilding. The existing outbuilding forms the boundary of the road, and the proposed replacement is not as big. It's presumed some sort of boundary treatment will be proposed. This was raised in objection, but is not addressed in the submission of the report. So what is proposed to replace the current boundary wall? So in summation, we believe this planning application consistently fails to meet rules and policies outlined in the Council's planning policy and guidance development plan documents, causes unacceptable harm to privacy, and we recommend the planning committee reject the application in its current form. Should the applicant wish to withdraw the application and submit a revised proposal without a piggyback roof and addressing our concerns over fenestration and boundary treatments, our position may well be less adversarial. And
thank you very much. You obviously kept time because Sam didn't interrupt you, so thank you very much for that. I'd ask you to stay in the meeting because we may have questions of you after the applicant has spoken. So Mr. John Pike is registered to speak on behalf of the applicant. I think I saw him coming into the meeting, but he's not showing up on my screen. So if Mr. Pike is here, is he coming by telephone? Is it the telephone?
Yes, can you hear me, Chair?
I can indeed. In which case, if you're now ready to speak, Sam will start the clock as you start speaking.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to provide a short statement on behalf of the applicant to support the planning officer's recommendation to grant conditional permission for the rebuilding of this dwelling. The applicant is the owner-occupier and is anxious to rebuild the dwelling because of its parlour structural condition that renders it beyond reasonable repair. There are a number of benefits for the immediate and wider environment that this rebuilding would accrue. Certainly, it would be a significantly more sustainable dwelling than the existing, thereby reducing carbon emissions. Visually, the frontage would be vastly enhanced by using appropriate fenestration that does not exist at present, and the front boundary treatment would be reinstated. Consequently, the character and appearance of the conservation area would, it is considered, be enhanced. In respect of the overall design, references have been taken from the architecture of the existing building to ensure compatibility with the street scene to Fairfield Road. The piggyback extension would be set well back from the frontage so as not to dominate the design. Appropriate external materials would be utilised. It is noted in the planning officer's report that the piggyback element is considered to be compliant with Policy 40 of the Residential Design SPD. It's also a fact that a similar piggyback extension has been granted planning permission at 24 Minerva Road, which is nearby and also within the conservation area. The comments from nearby residents are noted, but it is not considered that the impact on privacy, light and enclosure will be very different from the existing situation. The footprint of the proposed building is very similar to the existing. In fact, it is slightly reduced due to the smaller outbuilding, as is the general height, except for the piggyback extension, which is set well back from the main rear elevation. It's also a fact that only one additional window is proposed at the rear compared to the existing building, a first floor level bedroom window. If considered absolutely necessary, this window could be glazed partially with obscure glass because there is another window proposed in the side elevation that would light this room. Consequently, the proposed development is considered to be fully compliant with policy DM10 of the core strategy, as it would not impact negatively on neighbours' amenity. The applicant is keen to progress the proposed development in order to rectify the potentially dangerous situation that exists to both school pupils and the general public. I trust the committee will accept the planning officer's recommendation to grant conditional permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you too for keeping to time or well under time. Do we at this point have any questions for the objector? I'm not seeing this in my notes, but I'm sure this is what we're moving to now. Members, we have 5 minutes to ask the objector questions, followed by 5 minutes to ask the applicant questions. Can you please show if you've got any questions for the objector? Councillor Fiona Bolt.
Right. Hi, thank you, Chair. It's really a question for both, but I can put it to the objector. I mean, at the moment, can you, I couldn't really ascertain from the plans. At the moment, there is no first floor window looking out over the back gardens of Caversham Road. Is that right?
That is correct, Councillor Bolt.
Okay. So what? So that's just a blank wall, is it, at the moment? That
Yes,
first.
that's correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm not seeing anybody's name come up on the chat function. So turning to the applicant, does anyone have questions for the applicant, please? Councillor Emily Davey.
You mentioned that the existing property's got problems, that's why the work is being done. If the work doesn't if you don't replace the property, are we talking about it falling down, or how is it, or is it that they just can't add more extensions to it?
No, there's a structural report that's been provided with the planning application documents, and the structural engineer has said that the building is really beyond being repaired. It's falling towards the grammar school. The exact reason why it's falling is unknown, but it suggested that maybe some work that was carried out in the basement of the grammar school may have caused it to start moving towards the grammar school. But it's very much out of line. I think it's falling by about 200 millimeters from the vertical. And there are very many cracks in the building, and the engineer has really concluded that the best solution would be to start again, a complete rebuild.
Can I add to that question a little bit? It's probably not in the purview of this meeting, but it'd be interesting to know. You have just made a suggestion, which also appears in the report, that the fault could lie with the grammar school. Has this been pursued with them in any way?
I don't think it has, because it's something that the structural engineer noted. He said there could be a number of reasons why the building is in such a parlous condition, and one of them could be the basement activity or the basement extension or basement work in the grammar school. I mean, that's the only reference that I've seen. I don't know whether it's been explored further. I don't believe it has.
Okay. The objector also mentions the possibility of suitable boundary treatment on the replacement of the outbuilding with a smaller structure. Can you satisfy him on that?
Well, yes, I'm quite happy to receive a condition that all the boundary treatments are agreed beforehand with the local authority.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else with questions for the applicant? I'm seeing nothing appearing in the...
Councillor Neatley.
Sorry, Councillor, have I missed Councillor Netley? Sorry, Councillor Netley. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. No, I just really had one quick question around the, just to confirm that you stated that you would be happy to partially obscure the rear window. Can you just confirm that that is...
Yes, that's correct. I think I think this first floor bedroom window seems to be an issue, because there isn't a first floor window on the rear elevation at the moment, and the applicant would be quite happy to accept a condition that that window was partially obscure glazed, so that no overlooking could occur from it.
Can I ask what you mean by partially obscured? Do you mean half the window would be obscured, or it would be obscured to a limited amount?
Yes, I mean, I think normally planning authorities say that obscured up to 1.7 meters above floor level within the room, so that you cannot then look out. I think 1.7 meters is a normal distance that is specified. and therefore the very top part of the window could still be clear glass. But I mean, if need be, because there's another window, I mean, the whole window could be obscure. I don't think it's a major issue. It would be if there wasn't another window, but there is another window on the side elevation.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that form of partial
1 minute
obscuring.
remaining.
Anybody else? Oh, Fiona Bolt.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the piggyback extension. What does it give you? It gives you more head height. Is that the reason why you have to have that? It wouldn't work without that? Is that?
Well, you get substandard rooms basically. I mean, it's giving you more headroom. I mean, that's what it achieves. A much better rooms at the second floor level.
Right, and the rooms at the second floor level at the moment, then they're sort of lower, are they?
Yes, yeah. So kind of they're partly within the roof. There's sort of skilling, I think they call it.
Right. And can I just ask about going back to this first floor bedroom? At the moment, that's a bedroom, isn't it, in the same place, but it doesn't have a window looking out the back. Is that right?
No, and ideally, you want as much light as possible. But what I'm saying is because there's another window proposed in the side, it could be obscure glazed. Okay. Therefore, there'll be no increase in overlooking of number 2.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we're probably out of time, are we, Sam?
Yes, time's up, Chair.
Right, thank you. In which case, thank you very much, both of you. And I believe you can now leave the meeting and watch the rest of the meeting on YouTube. That completes the public speaking on the item. Will, can you give us a sweep up of any matters arising from that?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think, first of all, just in relation to the piggyback, I think it's important to note that there are existing examples of this elsewhere within the Fairfield conservation area. It complies with the requirements of the residential design SPD. It relates well to the main roof form of the replacement and indeed the existing dwelling. And in terms of views directly opposite, it does add variety to the roofscape within the conservation area. So one of the key characteristics of the conservation area is the variety of sizes and designs of the houses. So I think that is a positive. In terms of the overlooking issue that's been raised, the proposed first floor window, it wouldn't give rise to any direct overlooking to habitable room windows. As stated in the officer report, it's considered that the proposal as submitted would be acceptable. However, if it's considered necessary by the planning committee, we could look at partially obscuring that window up to a height of 1.2 metres above internal floor level. I think those are the main points I took from the objector and the applicant's agent.
Thank you, Will. Do we have any other questions for Will, please? Please show if you have. While I'm waiting, I have one minor one. Well, I don't know if it is minor, actually. It's been noted that the other piggyback that's been referred to in the conservation area is in fact at the far end of a cul-de-sac, where really you probably can't get back far enough to see much of it. The difference with this one is that it faces the Fairfield. Are you aware of any other piggybacks in the area that face the Fairfield and therefore will be more visible to members of the public?
I'm not aware of any specific piggyback extension facing the Fairfield. I'll take the point that it is a different site and each application must be assessed in its own merits. I think the fact that there is a piggyback within the conservation area, and in terms of the street scene, as evidenced by the wider angled street view photographs, I think largely it wouldn't be a prominent addition. It's still subservient in height to the grammar school. It's substantially set back. And I think when looking directly towards the property, I think it does add the variety to the roofscape, which is alluded to in the description of the conservation area.
Thank you for that. Have we any other questions for the planning officer, please? I'm not seeing any coming up on chat, which means we go to comments between us. Any comments, please? I thought I saw some hands reaching towards keyboards, but perhaps I'm mistaken. I'm seeing no comments. Do we, colleagues, do we want to add one or two conditions? One would be to ask for the partially obscured window that we've been talking about. The other one would be confirmation of the boundary treatment, given that the smaller structure of the outbuilding. Again, I'm seeing nothing on this instance. Councillor Fiona Bolt.
Hi,
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Chair. I just want to say I agree that, you know, I think we should put those conditions on because I think it is important. You know, if you're not used to being overlooked at that level, I know a lot of houses would be, but, you know, it is a change and it would be better for them to feel more private.
So does that meet with the agreements of the, if we are minded to accept this application, can I ask for Councillor Bolt's support in seconding the condition, and B, would we be able to put that in? Maria Netley.
Yeah, I'd second that.
Right, okay, thank you. In which case, if we can put in those two conditions, please. We can then, if there's no further discussion, and I'm not seeing any, the recommendation of the report is to permit, subject to the conditions that we've just discussed. I will move that recommendation from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? I see Councillor Emily Davey waving her hand. I'm taking that that is a seconder. So seconded by Councillor Emily Davey. We will now vote on the planning application. Again, Kevin will need to call our names and ask us whether we've been in the meeting for the entire discussion and whether we're voting for, against or abstaining. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Abbas. Councillor Abbas.
Councillor, you're muted.
I'll move on. I'll come back to Councillor Abbas. Councillor.
Yes, please.
Councillor Fiona Boot.
Hello.
Hi.
Sorry. I confirm I've been in the meeting for the entire time. I'd like to abstain.
Councillor Olivia Boot.
I'm back now. I wasn't able to speak apparently, but I now can. Sorry for interrupting. I am back.
Can we take Councillor Abbas's vote next then, please?
Councillor Abbas, would you like to confirm you were in the meeting and can you give us your vote?
Yes, I confirm I was here for the duration of the time. I was able to hear everything. I just wasn't able to speak, and I am voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Olivia Bolt.
I can confirm that I've been here for the whole meeting and I would like to vote for, please.
Councillor Cunningham.
I confirm I've been here for the whole meeting and I'm voting for.
Councillor Davey.
I confirm that I've been here for the whole meeting and I'm voting for.
And Councillor Netley.
I confirm I've been here for the whole meeting and I am voting for.
And Councillor Ryder Mills.
I confirm that I've been here for the whole discussion and I will be voting for.
Councillor, that's 6-4 and 1 abstention.
Thank you. There are no urgent items authorised by the chair. There being no other business, this meeting ends at 21:59. Just got it in time before it ticked over. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
evening all.
Thank you, Councillor.